I think culture is essential, right? And creating a culture of security goes way beyond just development, but really the entire company. And
Okay.
you really start, creating awareness and make sure that the idea of security is always called out in every single interaction that you can have, right? From a good angle. It's not just there to be there, but really providing valuable feedback for people.
All right. Welcome to another Seeding AppSec. We have a very special guest today, who I've recently learned goes way back with our trusted leader Near here. But before we jump in, I'm Simon Wennett. I lead growth at Arnica. We've got Near, the CEO of Arnica, and with us today we have Cassio Goldschmidt, the CISO of Service Titan. So, Cassio, can you give us a bit of an introduction?
Yeah. So first, such a pleasure to be here with you, Simon, and here. I've been in information security for several years now. I think almost 2 decades, and I started as an engineer and then moved to AppSec, and now I'm the CISO, as you mentioned, for a company called Service Titan.
Excellent. Uh, well, I'd love to start, Cassio. You mentioned you started as an engineer. You're the CISO at Service Titan. There's a lot in between there that I'd love to have you walk us through. How did you end up in security and leading security teams ultimately?
Yeah. So I think the passion for computers, like most of us, start when I was very at a very young age, a teenager. I started programming and just fell in love with programming instead of the games. And when it come the time to go to college, it was kind of obviously what I wanted to do. So I became a software developer and start developing things back in Brazil, which is my homeland. And then I got a opportunity to go to Cisco, which at the time was one of the most valuable companies in the world, to actually be a software engineer there and work for a company called the Information Systems Advanced Technology Group. And there was able to do a lot of very interesting development. And one day got a call from Symantec, which was at the time one of the biggest companies in security in the world. And when you move to a company like Symantec, developing elegant code and secure code are quite synonymous, right? Meaning people really value code that's secure because they are being attacked all the time. And that's where I did the shift to security. And there was the opportunity to become the senior manager of the application security team worldwide, which I took it. And from then on, I think the company was just ahead of everybody else because they needed to be in that sense of, secure development life cycle and so on. And pretty much the rest is history.
Excellent. So, I mean, that to me, just in my understanding of the history, sounds like that was really on the cutting edge before application security was even necessarily a formal categorization in the security world. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think a lot of things called what we call secure development life cycle, we were already doing. We just didn't have a name for it. I would go to other managers and say, hey, here's all the stuff that we do, right, for you and to make your code secure. But yeah, it's just a bunch of services, right? And when Microsoft actually coined the term and came out with, I go, oh, now I see the forest, right? And because I was selling trees before. So that was a very interesting moment. And after that, you see, a number of other projects that came, the BSIM project from Digital, OWASP had its own project, OpenSAM, right? And it was really nice to see that the industry start marching towards that. And all the changes that happened over time with faster development, deployment, shift left, and many other things that came along the way.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, you know, in light of how far we've come, I guess, we've talked a lot about the term shift left on this podcast. We've talked about it in the context of, is it a buzzword? Is it a critical motion? What I'd love to hear from you is how do you think that the shift left movement has been successful or unsuccessful? And in what areas do you hope to see the most improvement in the coming years?
So, like any good idea in this space, it is something, but it's also a buzzword because unfortunately people misuse it, right? And make something that is really important that people should be thinking about suddenly sound like a meaningless term, which is very unfortunate, right? From my experience, it makes sense to actually inform developers and notify people as soon as possible whenever something is wrong, right? At least, from the time there was actually developing code, whenever I found something and it was still fresh in my mind, it would take less time to fix, right? Because I was really in the code base, right? And I didn't have to go back and think, okay, how does this work again? And as much as we write documentation, so on, you have to actually get to that mindset again, and having a bug that was filed 2 months later, if you're doing something, following a waterfall model, is just really painful to go back, right? So I think that pushing things left makes a lot of sense. The problem that I see is that for a lot of institutions, shift left became throwing garbage over the fence, right? And let developers deal with it and not really do the work that they should be doing. It was just, shifting unfinished work. And that's not the right way of doing, right? The right way of doing, as I see, is, for example, shift left a couple of things such as, let's give an example, hard-coded passwords, right? You want to find those things as early as possible, because if you find early, you can actually prevent it from going to the remote depot, right? And having it, how can I say, it spread, and such that you have to then clean up histories and things like that. And if you can do that before it's actually submitted to the remote depot, and you notify the developer in privacy, you actually avoid a lot of embarrassment, right? Which is great. People are going to do mistakes, and you just don't want them, to be like, hey, everybody, John just did the mistake, and it's pointing to his code. So that's also there's a benefit of not only catching things early, being able to fix things, as soon as they are found, but also prevent the issue being spread out, and the embarrassment for the developer.
I have so many things that you just said that are so interesting to double click on. So you mentioned that developers should get the feedback as early as they can, and not necessarily, down the line. Which is also interesting because everyone talks about shift left, and the meaning is let's just shift the automation left. But I think that what you are referring is let's shift the effort left, right? Which is completely different than just running tools. It's you mentioned, fixing a bug or fixing a hard-coded secret. If you can give it and that's the second thing that you mentioned, if you give it in the context of the state of mind that I'm in, meaning as I write the code, as I push the code, whatever, in that case, it would be ideal, for the developer to get that feedback and comment on that. I do want to raise another topic that maybe can take us to different directions with this, but when we're talking about shift left, there is essentially a couple of ways to do that, to get to that point where you're shifting the effort left. One way is going to the IDE, right? You can go to the Visual Studios of the world and maybe have pre-commit hooks on the workstations. But then, what are the chances that all developers will have those on their workstations? Maybe fairly low. But then the other way around is to go to pipelines, which is, everyone has a funnel. They go to the specific repo and push code, and things just automate themselves. But it works for one repo, maybe 5, 40, how do you get all of them or all of them that are important? Because every time that someone creates a new repo, you're missing the automation unless you have a certain process in place. So, and there's another way that is, I won't do the article thing, but another way would be like really maybe webhook based and event based. So wanted to hear your thoughts about what do you think about the pros and cons, maybe things I didn't think of, and how you shift the effort left.
Yeah, the webhook base sounds like a really good idea, right? Anything that you can do that is in the unavoidable path for the developer, and it's before things are actually committed, I think it's a good way of doing things. The IDE has also some advantages sometimes, right? Depending on what you do. So, it really depends on what kind of vulnerabilities you're talking about. But as you mentioned, the IDE or efforts such as deploying things for every single repo out there can be very costly. And quite frankly, if you are in a large organization, you cannot guarantee things, which is also something that is really hard to do, right? One of the things that I always worry when making claims as a CISO is to say I have 100% coverage, because it's so hard to actually get it unless you really have some specific points where you can hook things up, right? That you can say, okay, there's no way that people can pass this place without that. And that is very powerful for everybody, because personally, it makes me sleep better.
Yeah, that's true. And I think you mentioned one more thing that I wanted to touch on, because I know that you and I both experienced those issues. There's a lot of garbage in, garbage out that comes with tools, and some approaches can be let's give the AppSec team to look at the issues and decide how to manage the backlog. Other approaches can be let's empower the developers to make the decision. And there's something in the middle, maybe empower the developers to dismiss issues, or maybe suggest a dismissal if there is a false positive. And then the AppSec would maybe approve that dismissal. So what are your thoughts about what is a good balance when you work with engineering teams, when those things pop up, and let's say you got to the place that you notify the developers at their state of mind, what would be the ideal approach?
Yeah. So empowering people is always a good idea. And funny you mentioned, because I'm right now taking a leadership course at Wharton, and that's one of the main points they make. It's how you empower people in order to actually make a effort legitimate. But in any case, if you want to do that, you need to have trained developers, people who really understand what they are doing, in order to provide a solution. I see, for example, at ServiceTitan that we have some architects that come with solutions to us, and we verify the solution and say, yeah, this is good, let's do it, right? And because they have this ownership, they actually feel more involved in what they are creating.
That's super interesting. So how do you actually motivate them to come to you and ask you that, hey, this is what we want to build, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, so the way we do this is we have a weekly process where people present all their enhancements in related to development. Some of them are related to security, and the team is always part of these meetings which involve all the developers. And people do put a lot of effort writing the documentation and presenting what they are going to do next. So that's one of the ways. And just build trust, right? If people trust that you know your stuff, that you're not throwing things over the fence, right, for them, they will come and ask your opinion, and they will ask how to best create or develop solutions. So that's the other part that's important, is to always keep up to date on, the latest development, and think that sometimes the solution is not what you've been preaching, but really to innovate out from the old mindset that you had, and use new technology in order to abandon, or to how can I say, eradicate the problem that you had in the past.
And the way I'm thinking about it is, you led AppSec teams, I had AppSec teams, and one of the things that I've kind of been thinking about is, how do I make sure that let's say the high caliber that I have on the team, and I know that you do have high caliber on your team, how do they maximize their time in a way that, for maybe the minor things would be approachable or resolved by the engineering teams, but the really difficult decisions where it requires a bit more of those high caliber expertise, then you'll need to engage the AppSec team. So I wonder, what do you see in terms of the benefits of how a team should be structured when you actually have, garbage in, garbage out, whether you should have different skill sets in the team, or if you want to go fast, you need to take a different approach, or safe and trusted?
Yeah, so for the garbage in, garbage out, I think a lot of the automation that you needs to be trustworthy, right? I've seen, for example, static code analysis that will provide you everything under the sun, and there's a lot of false positives. And if you have tools that are actually not providing you the right information, you lose trust in those tools. So that's one of the things that you want to avoid as much as possible. A lot of times people say, hey, there's this tool that will catch everything. There's the other one, they'll catch things that are high fidelity and with high confidence. I know that they are, things they need to fix. In my opinion, it's better to start with those tools and then slowly, get to the nitty-picky details that you might need to actually address.
So I'm really curious to know, we've talked about empowering developers and the relationship between developers and AppSec. What does an empowered developer look like? And do you have any major success stories that you can share of how that's played out?
Yeah. So I think one of the stories that I have is that recently one of our developers presented a proposal to change the architecture of the product, right? And that was one of those meetings that I mentioned that we have every week, right? He came prepared with a document that was, about 20 pages long, explaining everything. And it was very interesting to see that, it really reduced the potential for information leakage in case there was a data breach, right? It simplified overall architecture for everybody, and at the same time gave more independence to the developers. And the code was separate in discrete sets of product functionality too, which would give us the opportunity to do things such as micro access to some parts of the code. So, and that just came from one of the architects. We look at that, we review it. We had some questions about the implementation and so on, and we approved. And it's really great to see that developers who come from sometimes bigger companies or have this education security, which kind of lacks in our industry, can actually think about code that is elegant and secure at the same time.
One of the things I just have to take it, to a side comment. We've been playing quite a lot with, Copilot and ChatGPT, and we saw also, customers using, Copilot and ChatGPT, and at least at the beginning, we noticed that there's a lot of SaaS issues that were popping up. And the main reason is because not the developers were not educated. Maybe that was part of the reason, but it's just the code samples that they've got were vulnerable. And on the flip side, if you educate them, as you mentioned, if you educate them, you can get to the point that they understand the big picture of what they should care about. And there may be like two big differences between the security practices. There's one that is secure coding, and there's the secure design, right? So I think that you referred to the secure design piece of it, which is, right, how would you ensure secure coding?
Yeah, so secure coding, it's ensure with static code analysis, security review, and looking at different things such as what kind of components are used, whether secrets are embedded, right? And it's really important to have those things as part of, as integrated in the process as possible. So those are, some of the things that we do. Making sure that those things also happen is very important, right? So, for example, just because you have in your process how can I say, a milestone, which is code review, people could just rubber stamp that, right? And go and say, hey, 2 minutes, I code review this, source code that is like 10,000 lines of code. Maybe not, right? So if something like that happens, it's nice to have some sort of alarm saying, I don't think this is being actually done with or taking, this activity is not being taken with the seriousness that it deserves. And those are, important things to have in your process as well. Just looking at the human factor in that things can actually be, rubber stamped.
Interesting point. On top of that, so we did quite a lot of research around open source repositories and the contributions with those repositories, including the pull requests. And, we measured multiple metrics, such as how the mean time to respond, impacts the productivity of the teams and such. And one of the things that we noticed is that a high percentage, and we're saying high percentage is about 30-ish percent of certain big repos, such as Kubernetes, and we averaged all of that. We noticed that percentage actually includes the comment LGTM. It is approved, it is reviewed, but it's just, hey, it looks good to me, and you never know whether it was a real review or not. Which puts me maybe in a different topic. There's obviously the security of the product, the piece that you deliver as the company product, right? So that's one thing, but there's another area that you just highlighted that seems to be also important, which is how do you ensure that your Git posture is the one that you expect it to be, such as, you have the pull request reviews, maybe enforced. So I wonder if you'd be willing to share what type of things you think should be, considered by every company when they look at the Git posture.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that being one, another one that is important these days, especially for, bigger companies, is the person who is actually, checking the code is actually the person, right? Was the account compromised? And one of the things that I've seen, that I thought was pretty innovative with Arnica was the fact that you look at the styles of the comment that the person put when they are actually checking in code to see, hey, this doesn't seem to be the same person, or, there's something here that looks funny, and try to alert if something like that happens, right? So ensuring that, those things are happening can be quite valuable for a number of, companies, especially the big ones where they can be a target, such as the SolarWinds and many others out there, right? Because there's no way to really prove that the code that was written by a developer is the same that is going to, to your production.
Yeah, that's thanks for highlighting this, of course. But I completely agree on the, on the different areas that you should look at. Of course, there is the security of the developer, but there's also the security of the branching strategy. I'll just put it this way. So pull request, reviews, enforcement, maybe even, specific status checks, if you use any of the major SCMs, right? So there's one thing I did notice that is actually happening out of band, or should hopefully happen out of band. I noticed that initially when I had a lot of conversations about hard-coded secrets, I asked many companies, how do you do that? And the recurring answer was, oh, we put it in the pull request. And everything I had in my mind is, it's too late. It's already in the repo, and maybe the pull request was opened months after someone was working on that feature branch. So I just had to throw that comment because we just shifted to that topic. Not going to derail it anymore, but there's a shift between even what you do and where you want to do those things.
Yes, no, absolutely. And that, although a lot of people right now are challenging the fact that it costs more to fix things later, I think intuitively that principle holds, right? And just the fact that you contaminated your repo is actually a big proof, because then you have to remove that secret from all the history, right? And that's something that a lot of companies, unfortunately, still miss. And, there are plenty of tools out there that will find secrets given the history that is in that, repo. So that's a really good point.
I'd love to pivot just slightly here. There's the famous line, "Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome," from Charlie Munger, right? And it has felt like the incentive structures for security and developers have had misalignment in the past. But I think there's a lot of energy, a lot of effort going into realigning those incentives. I'd love to hear from you, Cassio, where you feel like that realignment is occurring, and maybe what are some successful paths that you see towards alignment of those incentives?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the important things to start is why there's this misalignment, right? Why, security is saying one thing and developers are doing another. And there are a number of reasons that go way beyond, being lazy, which I don't think developers are, that is happening. The first one is that developers, most of them, are measured by the number of features they deliver, not by the security quality of the features they deliver. In fact, security most of the times is invisible. You just don't see it, right? And what goes in your yearly or semi-annual review is really what you deliver, right? And that is true because whenever you compare two products in the company, you see those charts, those tables comparing, you see, the feature set of those products. Product A does this, product B doesn't. Product A is a better product, right? And that's the way the industry think. And the third part is that a lot of products today, they want to become a platform. They want to, become the base where all the other products plug it into. So they have this stickiness to their nature, right? And in order to do that, if you want to get partners to invest the time to do things to your platform, the entry to that platform needs to be really simple. And a lot of times simple means, no security, or, lack of security, because security, quite frankly, is something hard to get right. And if you enforce a lot of security in the beginning, people will throw their hands up, up and say, no, I'm not going to do it, especially if you are a new entrant, right? So what can you do to realign the incentives? I still think education and awareness is really important. And I think we already covered the education part, but the awareness, it goes beyond. I think it's about the negative incentives that are out there. And what I mean by that is the laws related to data breach, the company reputation, right? The developers being derailed from what they have to do to actually get the new features out is something that is really important, and not always emphasized. If something goes wrong, everything that can actually, happen with it. So that's one of the parts. The other one is automation. I think as much as you invest in education, people will do mistakes. I will do mistakes. Everybody is going to do mistakes. To where is human. So you need the automation out there in order to make sure that you have the equivalent of your seat belts, your ABS in the car. And ideally, we need to relieve the developers of the additional work by fixing tasks with their natural workflow, right? It needs to be something that is just part of what they do, right? And you get security done as part of that, right? And the other one is on us. We talk so much about developers and what they should do, but I think true AppSec engineers need to be engineers, right? And a lot of people get into security and they, never develop code, and there's no empathy, there's no real experience, there's no understanding, or sometimes there is, and they just stop along the way and think, okay, I'm just dealing with security. I'm no longer going to, get my hands dirty and understand what's going on. I think it's really a ongoing process. You're always learning, you're always understanding what's going on. And it's really important to, to be in this mindset. And the last one is just quality, right? I wish that there was more reward from management on, measuring quality metrics and rewarding for those metrics, whatever they are, for the developers and the security community too, right? Breaking builds and things like that. I think security should be accountable for anything that they do that is also not working properly.
I have to ask you. So you mentioned that you need to work with the developers where they work. Obviously, you want to avoid as many mistakes as possible, on the development side. What are your thoughts about how should you manage backlog vulnerabilities or backlog risks versus new vulnerabilities that are being introduced, maybe starting from feature branches before they're even merged into a production branch?
It's a tough one, right? I think one day Michael Howard, once was asked about why there are so many defects in Microsoft products, and why there are so many patches, and he said there are so many patches because we're doing our job, right? And I thought was a very good answer to the question, why you see so many vulnerabilities. So fixing is a good thing and should be prioritized. The fact that it's in a backlog or it has been longer forgotten because the code is no longer the new code can be very misleading. In fact, I think one of the most critical vulnerabilities out there are a lot of times in code that has not been seen for several years, right? At the same time, if there's something in new code that you're developing, I think there's no excuse, knowing what you know today, to let it go. Right. So given all the automation, given all the tools and so on, I think it should be fixed as soon as possible, whenever you can.
It also adds to the fact that, if you're always chasing the engineering teams and they can continue writing code. I mean, think about maybe having one AppSec per 100 or 150 engineer. You will see that engineers will continue introducing new vulnerabilities while you're chasing them and trying to reduce the backlog. So I completely agree that there must be some balance between the things that are fundamentally important to mitigate in the backlog, and you need to prioritize those. But also, because of the automation, you can and hopefully should get to the state where you get to zero new vulnerabilities, which is fairly easy. It's in the context and the mind of the developer as the right code.
One thing that is really dangerous about having a backlog, and unfortunately I've seen in previous companies, is that people come and say, hey, this has been open for so many days. Why you think it's that important again, right? I mean, there was no attack. We should be good. So the longer it stays, the less people seem to care about it. So that's the other problem that, until it becomes a reality, and then it's too late.
Even in product, feature development, I'll say that there's sort of two backlogs, right? There's your prioritized backlog that you're actively trying to get into development, and then there's sort of all the stuff that you tell the sales guy, oh yes, it's in the backlog. Oh yeah, I'm putting it in the backlog, and it does feel that that dynamic plays out in security as well, where because the backlog is so bloated or so utilized, that just the nature of it is that you have to have a subset that you prioritize, and then there's sort of the forgotten long tail of tickets. I'd love to close out today's conversation with a discussion of culture, and I'm just curious, Cassio, in your journey, what role has culture, as opposed to tactics or tools or process, what role has culture played in empowering developers to impact security in a positive way?
Yeah, I think culture is essential, right? And creating a culture of security goes way beyond just development, but really the entire company. And you really start creating awareness, and make sure that the idea of security is always called out in every single interaction that you can have, right? From a good angle. It's not just there to be there, but really providing valuable feedback for people. Hey, here that, you're going to use this technology. Great. Here are a couple of things you should consider here. So it takes time to actually shift a company culture. But once you do, and you start having allies to, developing security, create a extended team that actually will look for this kind of things and want to do the right thing, not only because it's the right thing, but also, potential for improvement and being a better person, right? It's really, really important, and that should be incentivized too.
I think there's an additional angle, not only, to the developers, there's an additional angle that is great for security that, and again, I think you saw that in past Cassio as well. The people that are upcoming to be, great security engineers or great security architects typically grow from those areas where you build something, and maybe people are getting excited about that. You fish those people with an F, not with a PH, and then you build a good relationship. You build the people that have an impact in the company, that are excited about what you do, and eventually, in some cases, you can even hire them into your team.
Yes. Yeah, and I think a lot of people that are hired in the past are just like that here. It's people who were embedded in development engineering teams, and they came to security because they were so interested and fascinated by the topic. And they brought a lot of intangibles, right? Not security knowledge per se, because that can be learned, but just the relationship, the knowledge about the product architecture and so on, that really paid off randomly for the team.
Excellent. Well, I want to round things out here with a quick lightning round, Cassio. And so when you're ready, if you were the leader of an anonymous hacker group, what would it be called?
That's a funny question, because I must say that I never thought about that, before. I think it would be very funny to have a hacking group that leads people to think they were hacked by elementary school. So, I would love to call the group like the Whiz Kid Academy Elementary. How about that?
Love that. Love that. Excellent. How do you take your coffee?
So, I don't drink coffee, actually. I have a terrible habit of drinking Red Bull in the morning.
All right, in a can that's not actually coffee. That'll do. And what advice would you give a young aspiring security professional?
it's always important to stay curious and be responsible, right? And that's the greatest advice I can provide.
Excellent. And then we added a new lightning round question this week. You get one free plug. It can be a book, a movie, a product, a peanut butter brand, anything you want. What's your plug?
Yeah. So to be quite frank, I'm a minimalist, not materialistic person. I when I think about products, there are not a lot of things like book, movies, products, things that I like. But one thing I would tell everybody is to try doing sculling in a single shell. It's something that I've done in the past, and I love just because of the peacefulness of being the beautiful lake and the exercise you get. It's a really, really great way to start your morning. So if you ever have this opportunity, do wake up early and try to do that one day.
Love that. Love that. Well, thank you, Cassio, so much for joining us today. This was a phenomenal discussion. And I so look forward to speaking with you again soon. But another excellent episode of Seeding AppSec, and looking forward to the next one.